This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The Quarantine Report. I'm Amy Goodman in New York. Juan Gonzalez joins us from his home in New Brunswick, New Jersey. Hi, Juan.
Hi, Amy, and welcome to all of our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world.
Well, people are voting across the United States for an election which is on pace to have the highest turnout rate in perhaps 150 years, percentage-wise. Nearly 100 million people have voted early. That's nearly 3/4 of the total 2016 vote count. But campaigns are still scrambling to get out the vote in key battleground states. On Monday, President Trump campaigned in North Carolina, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Meanwhile, Democratic presidential nominee, former Vice President Joe Biden, campaigned in Pennsylvania and Ohio. On this final day of the 2020 campaign, we look at how Latinx voters could play a key role in deciding the presidency and who controls the Senate. Many battleground states, including Florida, Texas, and Arizona, have large Latinx communities. Many polls show Biden is not doing as well among Latinx voters as Hillary Clinton did in 2016. One recent poll in Florida showed a majority of Latinx voters supported Trump over Biden. We're joined now by two guests. Chuck Rocha was a campaign advisor to Bernie Sanders. He now runs the pro-Biden Westro PAC to mobilize the Latino voters. He's author of Tio Bernie, the inside story of how Bernie Sanders brought Latinos into the political revolution. And we're joined by Maria Hinojosa. She's an award-winning journalist, author of the new memoir, Once I Was You, a memoir of love and hate in a torn America. She's founder of Futuro Media, host of Latino USA, and co-host of the podcast In the Thick. Chuck Rocha, we begin with you. You're a numbers guy. Looking across the country, there was a Bloomberg report that came out this weekend that's saying Black and Latinx voters are not coming out in the numbers that Democratic Party hoped for. Can you talk specifically about the Latinx vote in Pennsylvania, in Florida, in Texas, where you are, in Arizona?
Well, thank you, and thank you, Amy. The Latino vote will be the single most important factor in this election. There's some truth on both sides of everything and all of the noise that you're hearing out there. There's one thing that's for sure, no matter where you are in America, that more Latinos will vote in this election than any time in the history of America. And already with early voting, you've had 2 million Latinos vote in Texas, 350,000 in Arizona, 1.4. All these numbers seem to drone together. But I'm not going to allow, and the Latino community is not going to allow, the party or either party to come step to us and say that we are underperforming. As I've been watching this election now for almost 2 years, working for Bernie, creating New Westro PAC, talking and listening to amazing journalists like Maria and others who are doing work in our community, I'm seeing this unrest. And what's happening is Donald Trump is becoming the best get-out-the-vote operation that the Democrats have ever run. Are the Democrats doing a great job? They're doing an okay job. But there are so many people that are voting that are Latino who have no voting history. In Texas alone, almost 500,000 Latinos who've never voted before and have no voting history are showing up. That's not because of some astronomical program that the Democrats are running. That's because they're sick and tired of seeing what this president is doing to our community. Whether what we see in polling, is it around coronavirus? Is it around healthcare policy? Is it around jobs in the economy? It's all of those things wrapped together in a cabal of unrest and uneasiness in a community where we feel like nobody's really speaking for us, and we are yearning for somebody to come have that conversation, debate the issues, and show up with their hat in their hand and ask for our vote.
Chuck, I'm wondering if you could talk especially about Arizona, because to me, I think Arizona is more reflective of the enormous change in the Latino vote, especially given the fact that Arizona only a few years ago was the center of so much anti-immigrant reaction, the heyday of Joe Arpaio, the Show Me Your Papers law, and really the Latinx vote there is probably going to be most decisive in moving that state into the Democratic column. Could you talk about what's happened there?
What you're seeing is an evolution in Arizona. And for all of you folks at home who may not live this life every day, Arizona is very different than Florida. It's very different than other states because it's like 80% Mexican-American. There's been the second and third generation of Latinos who've come of age in Arizona under a racist Joe Arpaio, under a racist law by the governor that said you have to show me your papers no matter who you are, even if you're a U.S. citizen, just because you may look brown. This is the attacks that I'm talking about that our community has lived through. And all of these young, woke, brown kids are now coming of age, where they have self-organized without any help from Democrats or Republicans for the most matter, and organize themselves, mainly around the Dreamer movement, the immigration movement, the Bernie Sanders movement, the social justice movement. And what you're seeing now, the fruits of those labors, there's amazing local Latino orgs like Lucha, who is a client of my firm, who've been working year in and year out in the state of Arizona. They don't just pop up 3 months before the election. They're there throughout the year, registering voters, helping people get access to health care, helping people fill out immigration papers. They're a part of the fabric of the community. And I've been preaching this since I was a little boy. If you show up there and you show up in the community and you show the community respect like Lucha and other community-based organizations, you start building the infrastructure of power. And that's what you're starting to see now because of the demographic growth in Arizona with these kids coming of age. And that's why you see a transformation of what's happening in Arizona in the electorate.
And Chuck, I want to follow that up, ask you about Pennsylvania. Everyone agrees that Pennsylvania is probably the most critical or decisive state in this race. But there's very little attention been paid to the Latino vote in Pennsylvania. I want to read you some figures. These are the latest figures from the census, the 2019 U.S. Census estimates. Not talking about Philadelphia, but all of the small cities outside of Philadelphia and in central Pennsylvania. Reading, Pennsylvania, 66% Hispanic. Allentown, Pennsylvania, 52% Hispanic. Lebanon, 44%. Lancaster, 38%. Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, 28%. There's a whole, it's called the 222 Latino Corridor. All the cities up and down the state that are along Route 22 that have had enormous growth in their Latino population over the last 15, 20 years. Wondering what your sense of the impact of that vote, which is largely Puerto Rican, Dominican, and Mexican, will have on the results in Pennsylvania.
Oh, my brother, as we say in Texas, I'm picking up what you're putting down. I lived in Pennsylvania for 11 years, and I was the national political director of the Steelworkers Union. My son this morning texted me a picture of him and my twin 4-year-old grandboys in Butler, Pennsylvania, going to vote. When I was in 1990 and starting with the Steelworkers, I ran a steelworker for Congress and moved to Bethlehem and Allentown, Pennsylvania, where I discovered this huge Boricua neighborhoods and all of the radio stations like La Mega. So I have been one of the first people out there jumping up and down on the soapbox, screaming about this. What happened in the last 4 or 5 years to exacerbate this even more was what you saw on the island of Puerto Rico. And with people fleeing Puerto Rico, people think that they all moved to Orlando. Well, over 200,000 of them moved in with their family members in that corridor that you're describing in eastern Pennsylvania. And because me and Nuestro PAC have seen no real investment in this community early, Nuestro PAC, my PAC, we spent over $1 million starting in July talking to Latinos. Now, many times we were the only ones there with some great organizations on the ground like Unidos Action Fund and a handful of others that have been doing the work there. But we've been diligently communicating in Spanish and English with this community because they have one thing in mind, and this is something that y'all talk about, Maria talks about all the time, is the difference between a Cuban voter and a Puerto Rican voter, even though they're both Caribbean Latinos. Puerto Ricans are way more apt not to like Donald Trump in any form or fashion and vote at 60, 65, and 70% for a Democrat. So you need to go have a conversation, talk to them over a long period of time like Nuestro PAC did. We sent them 6 pieces of mail, radio commercials, digital commercials. We did the Bernie Sanders paid multi-level communication, but we were one of the only ones to do it. Imagine if they would have spent the amount of money that they spent in Philadelphia talking to white persuadable voters, which as of my last check was over $50 million. Compared to my little $1 million talking to Latinos. This is an overarching thing that we'll talk about after the election, but you need to treat Latinos like white persuadable voters, invest the same amount of money, and we will no longer have to accept the bare minimum when it comes to Latino turnout and their persuasion percentages.
We are talking to Chuck Rocha, founder of Nuestro PAC. He's going to stay with us. But when we come back, we're also joined by the award-winning journalist Maria Hinojosa. She's founder of Futuro Media and has a new book out, a magnificent memoir that's called Once I Was You. Stay with us.